Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished entrepreneur from Austin, Texas, USA, Dr. Alaina Szlachta. Alaina, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ash. I'm so excited to be here. The world's largest podcast by episode count. Very cool.
Thank you. Alaina is the measurement architect. She's the founder of By Design Development Solutions, which is a consulting firm specializing in data enablement. So, Alaina, my first question for you, you've had an impressive journey from academia to entrepreneurship. What inspired the leap to start By Design Development Solutions?
So this is a great question. I had a corporate job and I hated it. I'm sure you've heard many a story along these lines.
Yeah.
And the reason I didn't like my corporate job is I didn't feel like I was making a difference. I didn't have a connection between my everyday activities and some kind of impact that I could feel, touch, smell. It was just like I was doing these things and I didn't understand why. I didn't like the way the company was run. And I thought there's got to be something else.
Yeah.
And so I went to Bali for a month and I decided I'm just going to go to a beautiful place and I'm going to go take some time and figure it out. And I went to a Balinese healer and I asked the healer, what should I do with my life? And he said, well, you've got to make money. And I said, well, I've been investing in real estate for many years and I can pay for the roof over my head and I can feed myself every month. I've got my basics covered. What should I do with my life? And he said, you need to employ people.
Okay.
And so I realized that I should be starting my own consulting practice. And I didn't know what that would look like. I didn't know what I would focus on, but I knew that being an entrepreneur was going to help me employ people. And that's what I did.
Wow, what an amazing story. And as they say, the rest is history. Alaina, my next question, what were some of the early challenges you faced as you transitioned to the business world, and how did you overcome these challenges?
Well, there is a very big difference between academia, working for somebody else, and working for yourself.
Correct.
And so I had to make a major mindset shift. I'm sure you've heard this before.
Absolutely.
And I also had to figure out how to manage my time because I was everything in the business. I was the bookkeeper. I was the salesperson. I was managing all of my data in terms of people and relationships and leads. And I was doing the work. I was doing the service. I was working with clients. I was measuring outcomes. I was doing all the things. And in the very beginning, so many of us start there. We wear all the hats. And so being really, really bold in boundaries around how I use my time. If I wasn't that way, I would have never been able to move forward. And so I took on only certain types of clients. I took on only certain types of projects. And I was very intentional with my marketing initiatives. And that has helped me, like through this hyper focus and prioritization, be a small business and navigate all the things that come along with business ownership. So that hyper focus, constant questioning, should I be using my time doing this? Is this the right thing to be investing in right now, or should it come later? And I'll say one thing that has helped me so much. I have a now, next, later list. And every week I look at what do I need to do now? What's next, and what is just later. Get to it whenever I get to it. And every week I'm looking and reevaluating that list, and I'm constantly juggling things, and it has saved my life and my business.
Wow. And when I was preparing for my conversation with you, I was fascinated. You have a background in communication, in public health education. You are an expert in data enablement. How has your background in communication and public health shaped your approach to enable data enablement and consulting?
So I would answer this in two ways. So remember, marketing, we all have to market ourselves. A brand called You is a brilliant example of you marketing yourself and your business, of course. And so going very far back into my career, high school, when we all are figuring life out, I was a competitive public speaker. I was on that nerd on the speech and debate team. And I absolutely loved it. I had to write and perform competitive speeches. I was on the debate team. I had to understand politics from all the perspectives and be able to debate any side of a topic. And I went on into college with a scholarship doing the same thing. And so I knew that I wanted my work to have something to do with communication and marketing. And so going into my undergrad, I pursued communication and marketing. And fast forward to starting my own business, it was my love for speaking and performing. I used to be a dancer also. Love to perform. I love to be with people and feel that kind of connection. And so my marketing has been very much about that. So podcast speaking, conference speaking, doing webinars and workshops, working collaboratively with partners where we can co-create events together, and being in the public and sharing insights and knowledge and interviewing others like you. That has made marketing easier, because I mean, my gosh, there are so many things that we do to put ourselves out in the world, and you have to look into what it is that you like and what it is that you are kind of good at or really good at. And so that made the marketing focus for my business really easy. And then the data side of things. So this question I get all the time, like, Alaina, all the things you've done in the world, like, how did you get to this data focus?
Correct.
And so it has to be just kind of by happenstance. The very first job I got out of college, where I was in the world of marketing and PR, I did an event planning, and that was our marketing strategy for this small business I worked for. They were very data driven. We had very intentional training on how to use Salesforce. They had a very thoughtful way of capturing and converting leads, and all the data that we captured on that lead conversion process was captured in Salesforce. We looked at reports together. And so imagine, I'm 22 years old. This is my first job. I have this very data-driven experience of the working world. And then I go to academia and I learn all about research. And so everything is about, what's the hypothesis? What are the questions we're asking? How are we going to look at data to help us understand some kind of insight or outcome? And then I went from academia to the nonprofit world, and that's where I had my work in public health. And I did a lot of work that was grant funded, community-based education in my doctorate program. So we were looking at, what are we doing and why, all the time. We worked with logic models. We needed to prove that our educational programming and the initiatives that we were building were actually making a difference. And data was the foundation of all of that. So then I go to the corporate world, and you know what I'm about to say. There's the data. People really weren't using data in the way that I had been raised. If you think about all of the different places in my career that I was being nurtured and being taught how to be a professional, it was all very data driven. And then I had this rude awakening and realized that not everybody has that luxury. And so it, for me, became the low hanging fruit. I'm intuitively good at data. I didn't pursue a data analytics career. I just happened to work in environments that were hyper data driven, and the results were incredible. And so now today, it's the place I feel like I can make the biggest difference, is in helping people make sense of data and help them realize that it's not as complex and overwhelming as we all might think that it is. And so that's what I do.
What a great response. Thank you. You know, as I was reading about you again, I was wondering, you know, a lot of people are scared of mathematics. In the corporate world, a lot of people are scared of data. How do you encourage teams that are overwhelmed by data to embrace it as a learning tool rather than a compliance burden?
This is a tough one. As I've learned in my career, every organization has its own data culture.
Absolutely.
And so some organizations, the data culture is non-existent. in some organizations, the data culture is used in a punitive way. And I'll give you an example. So I recently visited my dad. I see him a couple times a year, and my dad is an engineer and, of course, very data-driven person, and worked for a large corporate organization, the name of which I cannot share, unfortunately.
Sure. Yeah.
And he's been retired now for a couple of years. And so I said, Dad, have you been in touch with any of the people back at your company? How is it going? And he said they've instituted a new policy where they need to be constantly evaluating people's performance to look at who are we laying off next. And so the managers are now in a position where they have to constantly look at whatever performance metrics are part of their team dynamic or their deliverables, and they have to find the people who are in the lowest 10% of performance. They're forced into looking at the lowest 10%. Those people get on some kind of list. That list becomes the potential future layoff list. So that kind of culture where people are using performance data in a punitive way is not going to set people up for success to use data for any kind of learning if they're being forced to use data to figure out who do we lay off. And at the same time, in tough economic times, we do need to have some kind of strategy to figure out how do we cut back. So I have to empathize with those managers and with the leaders of that company who are making this decision. This is how we're going to use data. But the consequence of that means that people will fear data and performance evaluations for years to come. So I think we have to start with what's the data culture that is in existence in the organization that we work with, or if you are a leader or a founder of a company, how are you using data and how is that translating to a cultural, something that we don't talk about, but we all feel and understand? And I think we want to be really thoughtful about how we're using data because there is a lot of fear around it inherently. None of us love math. Most of us aren't trained to be engineers and to go look at big data sets and make meaning out of them. And if we live in a data culture that's got fear associated with data and performance metrics, it's going to be really, really tough to use data in a positive way, which is really the opportunity, is how do we use data to make smart choices? And I think we've got to first figure out what culture are we in? Why is that culture in existence before we start moving in the direction of what I think is the best kind of culture. And Amazon has this. I don't know if it's still in existence today with course, things that are happening in the economy. But Amazon and some other companies, I'm not sure which ones, but they use data and they want people to debate, to figure out what's the next best move to improve our products, to have better customer service. And they bring different data points that come from different places in the organization and say, hey, this is what I think we should do. And here's the data behind it. And then people will debate and collaborate. Well, is that really how we should look at the data? Is there another way to look at it? And they collaboratively, and it might seem like arguing, but when we have healthy debate, using evidence to inform our conversations, some really beautiful things, innovative things happen. And so I would love it if in the world of learning, we had that kind of dynamic where data was accessible and it was also something that we were encouraged to evaluate and share in team meetings and share with our CEOs and stakeholders and say, hey, here are the observations that I'm seeing with things like relevance. People are saying that these programs aren't relevant. Here's some data that I found that can help us make a difference. What do you think? Let's debate it. How do we improve this? So yeah, I would love it if we would have a more debate, healthy, open-minded culture that's evidence-based that helps us make smart choices. And if we were in that position, I think our companies would be a lot healthier.
Amazing, amazing. You also talk about the importance of culture and the educational landscape. What does what does culturally responsive teaching mean to you in today's educational landscape?
Great question. So my dissertation which I can't believe it, but it's been 10 years now since I graduated and successfully defended my dissertation. So my dissertation research was on culturally responsive teaching, and I used my absolute favorite assessment tool. It's called the Intercultural Development Inventory. It's a valid and reliable tool that looks at how we as individuals respond to difference. And there's a few different places that we might fall on a developmental continuum based on our life experience. And I love that tool. And so I used that tool to evaluate a group of people who were health educators.
Right.
And I then interviewed people who scored at average or low levels of intercultural competence. And then I interviewed people that scored at high levels of intercultural competence. And I asked them to tell me stories of when you were in the classroom and you faced a group of students that were very different from you and something didn't go as you would have liked it to go. What happened? And how did you respond? And how would you wish you could do it differently? And then I asked them to tell me a positive story when you were working with a group of students who you perceived to be different from you, and it went brilliantly. What happened? And so I asked them to dig into the very micro behaviors that they can recall using. And I evaluated trends and looked at what were low to average level educators doing versus high level educators in intercultural competence. And the differences were really compelling. And I don't think that the differences today in terms of what we should be doing to be interculturally competent and to work on essentially being great at navigating differences. We have to first understand who we are and how we show up in the world. So very simple. And it's not communication styles. It's like, how do people perceive me based upon I'm an American and I'm white and I'm a woman and I dress this way and I talk this way and I have this background, being accountable for how we are perceived, rightly or wrongly. And then also being accountable for other people that we work with. How do they present themselves? How might they be perceived? What are some of the stereotypes that we and biases that we might bring into conversation with people? Where do they come from? Are they founded or not? Are they helpful or not as we get to know people? And so that level of self-awareness is critical, and being able to lead people, to be able to be a good educator. And I think today, if there's one thing that would help us be more interculturally competent, it's to really nurture that self-awareness. And I think we would see some really different outcomes.
Absolutely.
If that works.
Great response. Great response. And Alaina, how can educators use data to ensure their teaching practices are inclusive and equitable?
This is a tough one. Inclusive and equitable. They're very different things.
I agree.
Let's start with equitable. So there's an image, and you could probably Google search it, and it demonstrates what equity or inequity looks like.
Correct.
So equality and equity are not the same thing.
Absolutely.
Equality would be giving everybody the same opportunities, regardless of where they come from, regardless of their experiences or the things they have or do not have. And so equality is, let's give everybody $10,000, and that's the gift that they're going to be given to go start their lives. Everybody gets 10 grand to make a business, to go to college. That would be equality. Equity would be, let's take a look at what background, experiences, challenges, or opportunities people inherently have because of where they were raised, where they were born, who their parents are, and other socioeconomic dynamics. So think of the FAFSA, for example. The FAFSA is a tool in the US that helps, at least it used to be this way. I don't know what the future of the FAFSA is, but the FAFSA was a tool that intook information about students' socioeconomic status, considering their parents' socioeconomic status. And so the FAFSA then awards financial aid to students to be able to afford college based on their parents' socioeconomic status. So that's a great example of equity, that if my parents' socioeconomic status is middle or high, I'm obviously not going to get as much support from the government as some parents that have very low income to no income. So that would be an example of equity, is let's look at the factors that an individual brings to the table that maybe are out of their control. And I love using the example of students who are 16, 17, 18 years old going to college.
Yeah.
They don't have a socioeconomic status, their parents do. And that is the dynamic and the context in which they enter the educational arena. And so if we think about where can we be more equitable, we would consider the dynamics that are out of people's control that very much contribute to, in a positive or negative way, into this starting place. So the idea being that if we could create a more equitable starting place for college, where we make it more affordable for people that can't afford it, and then for those that have a higher level of socioeconomic status, that we're not giving them the same amount of financial aid because they might have a leg up because their parents have more money. That leveling the playing field so that people, when they start, they're starting from a similar place.
Absolutely.
Because you can imagine people that have student loans that also don't have a high level of socioeconomic status, that burden is a really big one to carry into their careers.
Absolutely.
So,
well said. I have time for two more questions for you. What are the top 3 indicators you look for when evaluating an educational program's quality?
This one is actually pretty simple, and it's answering this question. Did we do what we said we were going to do?
Okay.
So every initiative exists for a reason, and it's not just to complete it. It's not just to get people to attend the initiative, though those numbers are important. If we are investing in an initiative for a reason, and if people don't show up or they don't complete it all the way, that's obviously an indicator that we need to reevaluate the marketing of the program, the design of the program, the resources, whatever. But did we do what we said we were going to do? That forces us to ask the question, why are we doing this initiative in the first place? That's not just about completion and attendance. And further, how do we know that we accomplished that goal? What are the data points? What are those data artifacts that would tell us we're moving in the right direction or we're not? So I would keep it that simple. What are you doing and why?
Yeah. And
what data will tell you if you did what you said you were going to do.
Very interesting. Thank you. Tell me about your Measurement Made Easy. What led to its creation, and what's your vision for this?
Measurement Made Easy. It is a community for people who are, like me, very passionate about data, measurement, and ultimately wanting to have a greater impact. Remember back to the story I told you about, I worked for a corporate and I just didn't feel like I was making a difference. I needed better systems and tools and better communication strategies and better relationships with my stakeholders to make that connection between what I'm doing every day and some kind of difference I'm making for the company or the people that we serve. And so Measurement Made Easy as a community, it's evolved in how it does what it does. I used to do weekly meetups, and that was a little overwhelming in terms of the commitment. Now I do monthly meetups, and we literally get together in a forum format where we catch up because we know each other. We see each other every month now. And then I ask a question. What are you working on and how can we help? Or is there a burning topic or question that you would like us to nerd out on? I literally use that language. We're going to nerd out on a topic related to data, measurement, and evaluation. And we upvote the topics, and we spend 30 to 40 minutes talking and debriefing, and I coach people and guide people and let the group share ideas to come to some kind of playbook. And that's the value of the conversation, is that we pick a topic or question and we work to a playbook that would be a step-by-step process that would allow people to answer the question, do the task, or address the issue in some kind of actionable format. And then we wrap up and check out and that's that. But it's a lovely format, and I do it because I work in a very niche space. I work specifically with leadership development companies, and I build assessment tools and I build data enablement strategies for them. But that's a really small market, and I'd like to be able to help and understand the challenges for people in all different parts of the learning landscape. And so it's a way to understand challenges, to get ideas for what to write about, because I write every week a thing called the Weekly Measure. It's a Substack. And so I get really good ideas by just talking to people, and it helps me to do my own research and development and to put out meaningful content, which is my marketing strategy for, helping people discover me in the world.
Fascinating. And on that note, Alaina, I just want to say, what a fascinating conversation this has been for me. I mean, I have been very data-driven myself throughout my life in the corporate world and as an entrepreneur. But talking to you, I think I learned many, many new things from you. I think the whole world of data has changed, and I'm not surprised that that old phrase, data is the new oil, is really reinforced by everything that you told me today. Thank you so much for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Ash. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.